When I was 23 years old, my dad passed away when I was 15. 2 months after, my mom, who was 45, started a new relationship and her partner moved in. My dad left all his belongings to me and nothing to my mom since they weren't married. Her attempt to contest the will failed because it was clear-cut. She even asked me at midnight to give her one of my properties to please her new partner. But I couldn't because the will stated I had to be 21 to inherit. My mom's new partner had kids, aged 18 and 19, and my mom focused more on them to make him happy. She wasn't a bad parent, but she tended to favor his kids. They would go on trips, and even though she didn't outright forbid me from joining, she dropped hints like, "Wouldn't you prefer to visit your grandparents?" It was clear she didn't want me around. By the time I turned 17, she asked me to leave our home because I clashed with her partner and reminded him of who owned the house whenever he tried to assert authority. I even called him by his full name, John Conroy. My grandparents advised me to avoid conflicts, so I moved in with them instead. My mom used to visit me often and reassure me of my late father's love, but she always emphasized the need for peace at home. After finishing college, I decided to check on my properties, especially the one where my mom lives. I planned to renovate it for renting to support my master's degree. When I went to inform her about my plans, no one was home. They had gone on vacation without telling me. Unable to reach her by phone, I decided to change the locks to assert my ownership. When they returned yesterday, they couldn't get in and called me, but I was out of town. Today, while preparing for upcoming renovations, my mom stormed into the backyard furious, accusing me of wrongdoing. After our conversation, I gave them a 2-week notice to vacate the premises. My mom's husband, who is self-employed, or rather, unemployed, was angry. Both my mom and her stepdaughter broke down in tears, especially since the stepdaughter was pregnant. Despite their emotional pleas, I remained firm in my decision. My mom's side of the family is criticizing me, but I want to know if you think I'm in the wrong. Just to clarify, I own the house and have been paying the property taxes every year. My mom reached out today to discuss the situation. I don't believe I'm wrong for reclaiming my own space and prioritizing my needs now that I'm an adult. It's important to handle everything legally to avoid complications. I can't help but wonder if my father had some foresight into this situation, considering how he distributed his assets. Also, while I sympathize with my mom's stepdaughter's pregnancy, I don't believe it changes my responsibility towards them or the situation. Hope you showed generosity by allowing them to stay until you were 23, even though you could have asked them to leave when you turned 21. They should appreciate your kindness instead of attacking you. However, be cautious of any potential retaliation, such as damage to the property. Regarding your attempts to notify them, simply calling and visiting once while they were away might not suffice as official notice. It's essential to follow legal procedures, like sending a formal letter with proof of receipt. Changing the locks before they're officially evicted could be seen as premature. There are likely laws governing their rights as tenants, so it's important to understand those before taking further action. It's a complicated situation, but it's crucial to proceed with caution and consideration for everyone involved. It's important to understand that as a landlord, you have certain legal rights when your property is rented out, and these rights go beyond what we can discuss here. It's concerning that your mother treated you poorly over the years, but now expects to benefit from your generosity when she needs a place to stay. She's an adult who has made her own choices, and she should face the consequences of those decisions. You're not obligated to take care of her or her husband, especially considering they're capable of working. While it's unfortunate that her stepdaughter is pregnant, ultimately, your assets and home are your own. If possible, consider cutting off contact with her and firmly assert your boundaries. You're not her financial support, that was her responsibility, and she failed to prioritize you in favor of her new family. If she was happy with them, she can stay with them, and they can deal with their situation together. As for my background, I have 4 children. My eldest, John, who is 27 years old, is from my first marriage, which ended when he was 5 years old. I remarried and gained 2 stepdaughters, Lisa, who is 25, and Anne, who is 18. With my second wife, we also have a son named Mike, who is a teenager. We've worked hard to provide them with comfortable lives. When John and Lisa finished university, we gave them condo units as gifts. We plan to do the same for Anne and Mike when they graduate. Additionally, they each have trust funds that will be available to them when they turn 30. I'm incredibly proud of all my children. John and Lisa graduated from prestigious universities, and John now has a well-paying job as an engineer, while Lisa pursued a master's degree and now runs her own marketing consulting firm. John recently got engaged to his girlfriend, whom he plans to marry by the end of the year. While she doesn't earn as much as him, he enjoys spoiling her with lavish dates and gifts, using his own money. She has moved in with him in the condo I gave him as a gift. From what I gather, his fiancée isn't contributing to the household expenses, and now John wants to dip into his trust fund to cover wedding costs since she doesn't have much money. Here's where I may have messed up. I suggested releasing part of his trust fund early if he agreed to a prenup with her. He got upset, accusing me of favoritism because I released half of Lisa's trust fund last year to help her start a business. I explained to him that Lisa used her trust fund for something productive, whereas using it for a wedding, while important, doesn't seem financially wise when his fiancée isn't financially stable. I simply wanted him to have some financial security by considering a prenup. He became even more upset, accusing me of suggesting that his fiancée is only interested in his money. My wife and the rest of the family chose not to take sides. Do you think I'm in the wrong here? You're being unreasonable. He's met your expectations, and now you're pressuring him into a prenup. I understand your concerns, but if he ends up losing the money, that's his responsibility. Just make it clear that you won't bail him out. However, you're also being unfair to him. I grew up in modest circumstances while my husband comes from wealth. People labeled me a gold digger, but we have a happy marriage and now I even earn more than him. Does that make him the gold digger now? Just because someone earns less or comes from less doesn't automatically make them a gold digger. While a prenup isn't a bad idea, the way you're approaching it seems overly focused on money. It's important to consider other aspects of the relationship. So you're not entirely in the wrong. After all, why should premarital assets be shared once you're married? You're supposed to be a team. It's likely that any financial success your son achieves after marriage would owe much to his wife's support. However, gifts given by family members typically remain separate assets. Update. The following day, I had a heartfelt conversation with my son. Firstly, I apologize for my earlier comment about his fiancée, realizing it was disrespectful and unnecessary. Secondly, we discussed their living arrangements. He confessed to covering all expenses, including bills, groceries, and even hiring cleaning services. When I asked if she ever offered to contribute, he said no. While I have no issue with him spoiling her, I advised him to be more prudent with his spending habits. I stressed the importance of a prenup, mentioning that both his mother and stepmother had one. However, he remains reluctant, fearing it might upset her. This raises concerns for me, so I will uphold our agreement to release his trust fund when he turns 30. He wasn't pleased with my stance. Lastly, I inquired about their wedding plans that necessitated dipping into his trust fund. She envisions a lavish beach wedding and desires an elaborate engagement announcement through photo and video production, which I found excessive. Despite their desire for a wedding this year, they lack the funds, with her only covering the cost of her dress and my son admitting to having minimal savings, likely due to splurging on costly dates and trips. I advise them against it, emphasizing the impracticality of their current situation and suggesting they save up for their dream wedding instead. At that moment, I felt reassured in my decision not to release his trust fund prematurely. In my view, there's a risk of my son facing financial strain in the future by financing everything and indulging his fiancée. The trust fund represents the final inheritance for all my children. With that said, while I may have made some mistakes, I stand by my choice to not fully support their wedding plans. My wife and I have agreed to provide them with a set amount that should cover a beautiful venue and leave some leftover for additional expenses. This will serve as our wedding gift to them, and if my son remains dissatisfied, then there's little more I can do. Even if they choose to limit contact with us, I'll find peace in my decision. I've supported him and tried to shield him as best I could. While I would hate for him to lose everything if their marriage were to end, ultimately, it's his responsibility. Nonetheless, I genuinely hope their marriage succeeds. Regarding the financial aspect, it's puzzling how they could lack funds for a wedding when they own a paid-off condo. He holds a well-paying job, and she's employed as well. What kind of wedding are they planning? Are they aiming for a lavish affair akin to Justin Timberlake and Jessica Biel's? Personally, I managed to save a substantial sum from a decent salary and homeowner expenses to afford a respectable wedding with careful planning and budgeting. It seems like they could benefit from some financial education more than a prenup. Am I the only one worried about the situation if what Opie says is true about his son's fiancée not contributing to household expenses? Personally, I always make sure to pay my fair share because I believe in being financially independent, and getting married shouldn't change that. Plus, why are they planning such a lavish wedding if she can't afford it? If your son messes things up and you step in to help, it might not actually be doing him any favors. Regardless of the outcome, he needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet. Hopefully that means he'll have a successful marriage, but I'm not so sure. Just last weekend, my best friend got married at a destination wedding, and I was honored to be the maid of honor. Originally, I had planned to leave my kids with my in-laws because I didn't want to tire them out with a destination wedding. But a few weeks before the big day, my friend insisted that I bring the kids along for the ceremony because she wanted them to be the ring bearers. I explained to her that I couldn't simply bring the kids to the ceremony because I couldn't afford a babysitter for the reception, with all the expenses of attending a destination wedding, including the bachelorette party, hair and makeup, the maid of honor dress, and the wedding gift. Adding another cost was out of reach for me. She pleaded with me, expressing her love for my kids and promising to arrange for a babysitter, wanting to support her and alleviate any additional stress. Especially after her wedding had been canceled 4 times in 2 years, I trusted her assurances. So we headed to the wedding, only to discover last minute that the bride had forgotten to arrange for a babysitter despite her repeated reassurances. As a result, my husband had to skip the reception and return to the hotel with the kids after the meal. While everyone else enjoyed the festivities with their partners, I felt isolated and alone, struggling to enjoy myself without my husband by my side. Although my best friend tried to reassure me that it wasn't a big deal, I couldn't shake the feeling of being left out and disconnected from the celebrations. All my friends were enjoying the company of their partners, understandably so. It wasn't their responsibility to keep me company due to the bride's oversight regarding the babysitter. Upon our return, the bridesmaids expressed their sympathy and acknowledged my feelings of frustration. They shared their own dissatisfaction with how the bride had pressured us regarding our spending, despite knowing our financial limitations. They felt she had unfairly manipulated us, especially considering her past wedding cancellations. This week, during a coffee meetup with my best friend, she encouraged me to share my unfiltered thoughts. So I did. I expressed my disappointment in how she had promised to handle something for me but ultimately failed, despite our efforts to accommodate her wishes despite our own challenges. I explained that I refrained from complaining during the wedding planning to avoid adding to her stress. But now that it's all over, I felt compelled to address the situation. I explained that I believed it was unfair for her to guilt trip us as if we were responsible for her previous wedding cancellations. She began crying and expressed feeling worthless and like a terrible friend, interpreting my honesty as an implication of her being a bad person. When the other bridesmaids learned of our conversation, they sided with the bride, believing I was in the wrong for sharing my true feelings and suggesting I should just let it go despite being justified in my concerns. Am I the one at fault here? You're not the one at fault. It seems the bride prioritized her own desires without considering the financial or emotional burdens it placed on you and the other members of the wedding party. Moreover, her reaction to your honesty, immediately resorting to self-deprecation, raises questions about her true intentions in seeking your opinion. It's possible she hoped you would validate her rather than express genuine concerns. This behavior hints at emotional manipulation, suggesting she may not be as admirable a person as initially thought. Destination weddings already impose significant burdens on participants, and the expectation for bridesmaids to cover their hair and makeup expenses seems particularly unfair. Despite the considerable effort and sacrifices you made for her special day, she failed to uphold a simple promise like arranging for a babysitter. It's worth considering why you maintain a friendship with someone who demonstrates such manipulative behavior. I'm sorry you're dealing with this situation. Your generosity and efforts deserve to be valued and appreciated.